Take this job and shove it.
Welcome back. This is Mike Baumgartner, your Work-Life Survival Sage, Chief Executive Officer of the Work-Life Survival Center, and your host. This is Jobcast Radio. Give me a call, 304-867-4142. Again, 304-867-4142 is my phone number. You can also call me on Skype. The name is Jobcast Radio. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook. You can always shoot me an email, mike@jobcastradio.com. And before the break, we were talking about the questions that you should be asking in an interview process. And it inevitably comes up at the end of an interview. The person you're talking to, and it may not be the person you're going to be reporting to, looks at you and says, so what questions do you have of me? And then there's usually this long, big pause of sound where you try and create some questions for the hiring manager, or again, that person you're interviewing with. You should have a few questions prepared, but again, remember, you should be asking questions throughout the entire interview. You really should. And as they hit your mind, you should be having a conversation. Nothing's worse than just a straight question and answer where the hiring manager is asking all of the questions. Then again, hopefully the hiring manager is sitting with a list of questions in front of you prepared. Not that he's reading them verbatim, but at least he knows what he's looking for. You should be doing the same. And I know that if you go on the internet and if you type in interview questions I should be asking or something like that, you're going to get lots and lots. In fact, during the break, I pulled up a couple of websites and I brought up a few questions that these sites tend to recommend that you should ask. Now, let me just put on my little former recovering HR guy hat and tell you that, look, there is a lot of advice on the web on everything. How to do your resume, how to interview. And now you've got to me on the radio telling you, here's what you should be doing. There's buckets of information out there. The bottom line is a lot of it is crap because they're written by people, number one, who already have jobs. And number two, probably people who have not been looking for a job. They're written by ex-HR people. They know what they like, or somebody who's done a lot of interviewing, so they immediately think that they know. You need to find people out there who are writing because they have had 20 job searches that they've had to do. Or recruiters are really good. A good professional, if they've been a recruiter for more than 10 years, not somebody who tried it out. Think of it this way. Let's say you want to buy a house. Do you want a realtor who got into it at the high point of the marketplace because it was easy to sell a house and to buy a house and all that kind of stuff, and just sort of jumped in, took a quick 6-week course, and they've been at it for about a year and a half? Or do you want somebody who's been a real estate agent for 30 years? Who knows the good and the bad and what sells and what doesn't sell? Somebody who has sold houses for the same person 2, 3, 4 times. That's what you want. Those are the people who are inevitably too busy to be writing the articles that we want to find. But somebody who knows and who's been doing this for a long time. If you need help on a resume, a recruiter of 20 years, best resource. You want to help on an interviewer, recruiter, 20 years, 25 years experience, they know how to do this because that's their job. HR generalist, now. Somebody who did HR, who did recruiting and then went into HR, now. A true somebody who's been in the job market, who's had to get people jobs, good times and bad times, that's the resource. So some of the questions that I found for you to be asking the people that you're interviewing with, just to go through here's number one. Can you give me some more detail about the position's responsibilities? Now, if you're in the middle of the interview, if you're at the end of the interview and you're asking this question, you're an idiot. Why? Because if you don't know this before you even walk in the door, and if they haven't covered this in the interview, you should not be asking. If they've covered it and you ask this question, now you look like you're not paying attention. And I can't tell you how many times people who are so tense and so nervous during the interview process, any information they've been given, they've forgotten. And I get that. I understand that. In a hiring situation and in a layoff situation, I know that after that first question or that first little piece of information, everything else becomes a blur. If this is my fourth interview of the day, I couldn't tell you who I'm talking to. That's why I get business cards and I take notes. But it all turns to fuzz in your brain. You're not going to keep track of it. So inevitably, it doesn't help you to ask for more information about a job you're interviewing for at the end of the interview you're talking to. Don't ask the question. But according to this article, you should ask that question. Lesson learned. Another question. Where do you see this position going in the next few years? Now, that is not a bad question. It shows that maybe you are interested in growing or advancing. I would rephrase the question for, look, I know that I can knock this job out of the park. What is my opportunity when I've done that for growing in this organization? Where does this job, what does this develop me toward for my next step? Is a better way to ask that kind of question. How often this position has been filled in the past 2 to 5 years? That's a good question. What is that telling you? It tells me, especially if this job has been had 4 or 5 people in here, that there are landmines in this job or they're really bad at hiring. 2 entirely different approaches. If they've hired bad people for this job, then that means they stink at hiring, which means, number one, if they hire you, they probably made another bad decision. And number 2, they're really bad at selecting people. So the people you're going to be working with are probably not good hires. So you're working with people who are in jobs that they cannot do. Very good question. Very different answers that you can get. You need to think that through and follow up with it. And another point, not to go off on a tangent, which, yeah, I know I do from time to time. Inevitably, as soon as an interview is done or your interview day is done, you're going to end up with 4 or 5 questions that you wish that you had asked that would be good follow-up questions. That is a loaded gun, which sometimes you want to do, especially with a hiring manager. Sometimes it's nice to shoot back an email saying, thank you. But it also came to mind that we didn't talk about this or that or the other thing. However, don't be offended if that hiring manager doesn't answer you back. Inevitably, if everybody does that, if this manager has talked to 5 people, they end up with another 25 questions. They're not going to reply to you. They're going to reply to the person that they are interested in. So if you really want to know if they're interested in you, then it might be worth asking a question about some sort of strategy, some sort of thing that you had talked about, just a follow-up question and stuff like that. Just understand, if you don't get a reply, it may mean you're not going to get a reply. And if you really don't want that information or that hint up front, which you should, because honestly, we want to focus our energy on jobs that are progressing, not on jobs that are herrings. And unfortunately, there are herring jobs out there, jobs where companies are just kind of seeing what kind of talent is out there. And I want to compare my ideal candidate to 3 or 4 other people so I know that I'm hiring the right person. And believe me, nothing makes me angrier than to know that I have wasted a day interviewing for a job that I'm not going to get. And it happens, unfortunately. But I digress. Other questions that you should possibly ask. Suggestions from the web. How can I most quickly identify that I have performed well? How are you going to evaluate my performance and with what frequency? Again, that's kind of a loaded gun. If you are already worried about how you're going to be measured in this job, you should have the attitude of, look, I don't care how you're going to measure my performance. I am going to knock your socks off. Should be the attitude that you are presenting in your interview, not cocky, but that is the attitude and the confidence you should be delivering in it. Asking how you're going to be measured might indicate to that individual you are concerned about that. What you might want to do is rephrase that question to, what are the goals that you want me to knock out of the park? What are the key priorities that you want? Give me the priorities of those goals and how you measure them and how you measure success so that I know that I am addressing your expectations. Again, drive it back to making your manager looking good and giving him or her what she wants. It's not about doing the job. It's about doing the job in the way that the person who is your boss, who signs your paycheck, wants you to do it. And that is a very distinct difference that if you don't focus on in the interview, you may not get the job. Because inevitably there's going to be a question that's going to be asked, and if you answer it wrong because the manager expected you to answer it a different way, whether the answer is right, you're out of the running. Because the manager has a vision of how this job is going to be performed, how this job will be measured, what those goals are, and what is his understanding of what that goal is. So ask for specifics. Ask for examples. That gets the hiring manager also clarifying exactly his understanding of the job. Because if the hiring manager says, this is kind of a new job, I'm really not sure how we're going to define success, run. Or if you're an individual who likes ambiguity and likes knowing that you may be in a job that you could be doing really, really well, but nobody can tell that because they can't measure it, then go for it. Have yourself a good time. Know thyself and what you like before you go taking that job so you understand that. Another question suggested, how are loyalty and hard work rewarded at this organization? Don't ask this question, because it will be interpreted as, I already am going to assume you're not going to pay me enough, so if I do really good, what more money are you going to be bringing to me? And one thing that a hiring manager does not want to know is 6 months down the road, you're going to be asking for a raise regardless of whatever the offer is. So don't go down that track. The offer process, offer negotiations, that's a landmine in and of itself. Different subject, different show, but don't go getting into that in the interview process. Remember, you want to get the job. You want to make sure that it's the right fit. You want to make sure that you and your boss are clicking on the same level and you're both hearing the same music. And if you don't know what that means, give me a call. I will explain it to you. Other questions. How would you define or describe your management style? Good question. Understand how that manager wants to manage you. Now, warning sign. If the first thing out of your manager's mouth is, I am not a micromanager, odds are they're a micromanager. Because when somebody has to bring that up and defend that they are not a micromanager, it means that they've heard that about them often. And it probably means they are a micromanager. They just don't see it or they don't want to admit it to themselves. Be aware of that. So talking about management style and expectations are a good thing. Another excellent question that you might want to ask, where are the landmines and what are the politics? Now, a lot of people would cringe at asking this kind of question. If you have a good manager, they should sit back, lean back, smile, and chuckle quietly to themselves before they jump into that. And hopefully they will be very candid and very honest about what are the politics of the job. Who do you need to interact with? Who are the people who for some reason don't even know why this job is being created? And that will happen. If this is a new job in the company, inevitably there is somebody there saying, we don't need this job. We don't need to fill this job. You need to know those kinds of things. You need to know who needs to be your friend first. Who do you have to win over? What are the landmines? One of them might be, by the way, you have no budget. And I want you to do, $6 billion worth of success for free. And that's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. If there's no budget for a particular job that should have a budget, or this job is manager of XXXXX and you have no employees, so you're not really managing anything, but we gave it a manager title so that we could pay you a salary because we know you're going to work 70 hours a week. Yeah, you need to know that up front. The politics and the landmines. Know where they are. Discuss them. You could discuss them with every person in your interview chain. It's actually excellent because sometimes you may hear different landmines, different perspectives, different ideas of where this job can succeed and where this job may fail. Now, caution, if you interview with 7 different people and they've described 7 different landmines and 7 different ways they intend to measure success of the job, you need to have a really good heart-to-heart with who your boss is going to be and relay to him. Hopefully you're talking to him or her last and saying, the people that I talked to, they gave me these following answers. They're different than what I'm hearing from you. How do we work through that? That makes for a great ending to an interview. And odds are, because you're asking that question, the manager is going to like who you are and know that he can be honest with you because you are going to be honest with him. Now, if you got more questions on that, you give me a shout. My number 304-867-4142, 304-867-4142. This is Jobcast Radio. Check us out, jobcastradio.com. We'll see you next week Bye-bye.
Take this job and shut it.